Joy is ferocious. Did anybody ever tell you that?
Yes,
Louise?
yes.
It is ferocious.
Yeah.
And hope is unstoppable. And a picture God gave me for hope is it's like a tank. Hope is unstoppable. Joy is ferocious. And people drenched in that will just change the world.
What is the atmosphere of heaven? But it is unstoppable hope and ferocious joy. Well, hello everybody. My name is Louise Reid and I am here with my very good friend Jennifer O'Brien, a dear friend, and Jennifer has just written a book which is just out. Not only have you just written a book, but a website, Instagram, the full works attached to it, Jen. We really are living in a different age. It's not just about writing a book.
Yeah.
But today we want to have a chat about Jen's book, and this is going to be a treat, I can tell you. So stay with us. So Jen, great to be with you, first of all, to say. I'm excited for this conversation because having read your book and knowing you, particularly in the last couple of years, even the endorsements at the beginning of your book are so uplifting and enthusiastic. Seriously, your friends definitely think that you are a saint because of the way that they describe you in the endorsements. Such not just an endorsement of your book, but an endorsement of you as a person. And just in reading Jen's book, and Jen, I have to say to you, seriously, you are somewhere between Maeve Binchy and Seamus Heaney. This book is not only profound and deeply moving, but it's you're a great storyteller, and it's actually it comes across like what we'd say in Ireland as a great yarn, except that it is so much a life story and your story. So Jen, maybe just to start off, could you just give us a bit of background? Who is Jen? Where do you come from? And what are you about?
Oh, well, Louise, it's amazing to be here chatting to you today. So thank you. No better friend to be having this conversation with. So Jen, or Jennifer, I'm Irish, like you, Louise. So I grew up actually in the north of Ireland in County Derry when I was a little girl. And then obviously had a very Northern Irish accent once upon a time, which is completely gone now. We moved down to Cork. So of course I have a Southern Irish accent like yourself, Louise. So grew up in Ireland, had a very happy life with a lovely family, mum and dad. And music really became my passion. I was a violinist and a pianist. And quite early on discovered that this was going to be a big part of my life. So went through the whole system in Ireland of competitions and classical music, which took me on to third level studies eventually. Another big part of my life, I guess, in Ireland was just enjoying school. And actually I loved the languages I learned in school, and actually I can see was probably a little bit of the seeds for me wanting to write and just loving words, which led later to me becoming a lawyer, which is sort of another segue or another avenue. And I'd sort of say thirdly, just enjoyed the Irishness of Ireland and the freedom of that. And the
Irishness of Ireland. I like that.
Yeah, that's a special. Yeah, that's a very Irish statement.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
So now both of your parents were in the medical world, and you grew up with a brother and sister as well.
Yep.
So tell us about your parents.
So mum and dad were from the south also. And so it was very unusual actually that we moved to the north. But dad got a job working in a hospital in the north of Ireland. He was going up the rungs to become a consultant surgeon. So of course it was a great opportunity for experience for him. And my mum is an amazing woman because she actually was a dentist. And for a woman of her generation, that was very unusual. So incredible. Brother and sister, we sort of loved and hated each other as kids, and of course we're great friends now.
Of course you are. Yeah. So Jen, your book is called The Power of Hope. and joy. So just tell us a little bit, what is your journey into that? How did, as you came to the UK to study music, 3rd level, what happened and what was the trajectory of your story that brought you to the place where you needed to discover hope and joy?
Well, as you say, I came to England to study classical violin. I loved my time at the Royal Northern College of Music and finished my studies. Had a bit of a hand injury along the way, so it didn't look like I was going to carry on professionally. So then I diverted, quite unusually perhaps, to studying law.
Was that a great disappointment to you?
Yes, at the time, of course. I mean, my whole life, I studied in Vienna and then came to England. I loved music. So when I had developed the small hand injury, I felt really quite hard done by.
I'm sure.
I had an element of faith in God, for sure. I didn't fall out with God over it. So we were still friends, but I decided to move across to study to be a lawyer.
Okay.
And so then at the end of my studies, the kind of a sledgehammer hit my life. And that was my being diagnosed with MS.
Okay, so what age were you at this stage when you had your diagnosis?
I was 28.
28, and a diagnosis of MS.
Yeah.
Living in London and training as a lawyer at that stage.
Living in York, actually, where I was finishing my studies, due to come down to London to start my training. And it was just the most enormous shock, really traumatic. I didn't know a great deal about MS, but actually the famous cellist Jacqueline Dupre had to stop playing really quite young because of MS. And I knew that the outcome could be awful. It could be early death or paralysis, for example, or it might be much less so, but it's a completely unpredictable disease. And as a young woman, I just felt like all my dreams collapsed overnight. Okay, so
MS is multiple sclerosis.
Yeah.
Would you just very briefly tell us what exactly that means?
Yep, yeah. So it's one of those autoimmune diseases where the body starts to attack itself. Kind of crazy that even is a thing. And so if you imagine your nerves being like electric cables, the plastic around the cables unravels, and so your whole circuitry misfires, and so muscles aren't just getting signals in the right way, and it can lead to, as I said, paralysis, blindness even, all sorts of weakness. Alternatively, some people really are barely affected. In my case, straight away, my walking was significantly impacted, particularly my right leg, not my arms, not my fingers, so I could still play the violin a bit, but massive, I've used the word sledgehammer, and really that's what it felt like, a sledgehammer hitting my life.
So you had an ambition to become a classical violinist, which was then scuppered, those plans and ambitions. Then you retrained in law and you were in London. So here's a diagnosis that essentially is going to potentially scupper those plans for a career, a high-level career in corporate lawyering in London, which would be a very sophisticated and wonderful job. So tell us how that all felt.
It felt overwhelming, being honest. I was sure that I just wouldn't make it. So I had this offer of a job, which I got 2 years before, not knowing anything about MS. So I went to the law firm, told them what had happened, and they were really, really good about it. They said, look, you've got a job, let's start. And so I did, but every day really felt like a nightmare to me, because I was trying to manage this new restricted mobility. I was using a walking stick at age 28. I just felt like an old woman overnight. And every time I had the least symptom, I was sure I was going to, collapse or deteriorate. Even going to bed at night, I would think, what if I wake up paralyzed tomorrow morning? I just didn't know. And at the time, nobody told me otherwise. So every day I would go to work, and that was just really hard. You can imagine you're competing with really bright other trainee lawyers in the fullness of their health. And there was me inside, really just going through a lot of torment. But somehow I managed day by day. I got past 2 months to my great surprise and just kept ploughing on.
Amazing. Now, I know, Jen, that there is so much hope and joy in your life, which we're going to come on to that in a minute and how you found that. But there must have been a few funny moments. There must have been some humour during that time in London. Give us a laugh. Tell us a few things that happened.
Well, of course, life is always varied, isn't it? So it's really good to actually talk about the funny things.
Yeah.
So one of the things I remember was I had lots of lovely colleagues, and 2 lads in my department were very serious lawyers. They always called me O'Brien,
yes,
which of course I completely objected to, but they were public school boys, so I was O'Brien, not Jennifer. And one day I was leaning back in my chair, sophisticated lawyer, kind of, not really, trying to think about the answer to something. I leaned back, and just above me in the ceiling, there is hanging a spike pointed directly at my head.
Oh my word.
Which, of course, this was a spike to collect messages on. And I looked at it and I thought, I don't even need to ask who's put it up there. So as much as I could storm at the time, because I couldn't walk so easily, but I went round to the lad's office, said, I won't use their real names, of course. I'm going to call them Frank and Joe.
There you go.
Said to Frank and Joe, what about the spike? It was really dangerous. Of course, they denied all knowledge.
Yeah.
And after a few minutes of me getting more and more irritated, they just burst out laughing, telling me that the whole department had been in on it, betting that it would take me 2 weeks to see it, and in fact it had taken me 3.
There you go.
So they were the kind of colleagues I had. But it was great fun in the midst of the pressures of lawyering.
Yes.
Leave aside my own pressures,
Yes.
they were just a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. But with great challenges, even with moments of joy. I was just thinking at that stage, you must not yet have learnt to look up, because had you looked up, it was there. You would have seen it on day one rather than in the 3rd week. Jen, your journey really is one from, there must have been a lot of despair, fear of the future, wondering how this illness was going to ultimately impact you and the trajectory of it. But really your story is finding the power of hope and joy. Would you maybe define for us what hope and joy is, and tell us really how you found hope and joy in the midst of very challenging circumstances?
Certainly. The push to finding them, let me start there, was the despair I felt. Despair, fear, anger, lots of the emotions you'd expect anybody to feel who goes through difficulty. And I know lots of people watching this or listening will relate to what I'm saying, because we all go through tough stuff. And what I've gone through is very obvious on the outside, but for many people the tough stuff is hidden, but they still feel the feels. But as a young woman, I was really despairing, because I was fearful all of the time of getting worse.
Yes.
I was terrified, actually. I was also really angry with God. And so, yes, I loved God. I had a relationship with God, but I was so angry. Like, how could you let this happen, God? And what I discovered, but it took some time, quite a lot of time, is this loop of despair and anger at God and negativity just takes you into darkness. It just doesn't get you anywhere positive. And really only when I came to my absolute end and just said, God, I cannot keep living like this.
And was that a particular moment?
Yes, there was a moment. I had many bad moments where I sort of half picked myself up, but there was a moment where I thought, this is it. I'm just not going to make another 50 years of life living like this. And so the first, my first kind of reckoning with God was, well, to try and do the common sense things like, think of good things and do some fun things. And while I gave it a good go, and that's all in the Bible, Paul tells us to think about the good and the noble things, I realised that I was really dipping into shallow hope, and it just didn't stick. And I knew then I had to find a deeper, more enduring hope, and that absolutely pushed me to the feet of Jesus to say, there must be a way, show me.
Brilliant. Jen, just to say, when you say, that moment pushing you to the feet of Jesus, can you just give us an idea, what did that actually look like?
It was a conversation with him. It was just a moment in time. There were no sparkling lights, no angels appeared, but I was sobbing my heart out in private and just saying, really honest, because God loves our honesty.
Yes.
And just pouring it out and saying, you can see God, I'm not managing. You can see Jesus, I can't keep living. And your word says that you love me, there's a way forward, but I need your help to understand and discover that. And in that place really of handing him everything, just not trying to perform, just being really honest, I could just feel his presence in the room. And what does that mean? Just a peace and just a sense of not being on my own. I knew he was listening. And then he began to show me, and he just brought a verse in the Bible to my mind, which I wasn't familiar with. I had to look it up. And I found the verse was Romans 15:13, which says, now the God of hope will fill you with all joy and peace so that you abound in hope. And I discovered two things, that God is a God of hope. And it sounds really obvious, but I thought God had a bit of hope, and then he had a bit of peace, he had a bit of love, but that wasn't right at all. He was fully the God of hope. And he wanted me to abound in hope, which is like bubble up with hope. So I suddenly had this revelation that there was no hardship I could ever face, that his hope wouldn't have a supply to triumph that. And it just changed my outlook. That was one key.
Wow, that is so profound. And I just love the way that I can feel the intensity of that just yielding and that surrender to him, hearing his word, and then his word literally becoming reality and flesh to you right there in the room. Now, in your book, one thing that I really love in The Power of Hope and Joy is that at the beginning of every chapter, you have a profound quote. Great technique for writing. I absolutely love it. Do you have a favourite quote at the beginning of one of your chapters?
I do have a favourite, and I agree with you because I didn't write the quotes. They're all amazing.
Oh, they're fantastic.
It's fascinating.
You've imported the best from the best.
The wisdom of the ages. But I've even pulled it out here to have my favourite quote, which was written by a composer called Leos Janáček. And one time I played in a string quartet and I played one of his quartets. But this quote was so delightful. I memorized it as a student, and it says, "Grow out of your innermost selves. Never renounce your beliefs. Do not toil for recognition, but always do all you can so that the field allotted to you may prosper."
Beautiful. Beautiful. Tell me why that's so important to you.
Do you know, it drips with integrity. I actually don't know if Janáček had a faith, but he he was speaking from the heart of God. He's saying to grow from the inside, you know, to not to toil for recognition, because that's vain, but always, he says, do all you can so that the field or the life given to you will prosper. And, you know, it's been my joy in this whole journey to recognize the stuff in my life I wouldn't have put in there. And I know God hasn't put MS in my life.
No.
But I can come to God and let him transform me so that my field prospers. And genuinely, I've really learned to continually live in hope and joy. It's just incredible.
That's sort of, because it's not a theory. You know, this is real. This has boots on. And even being with you, Jen, one of the things I would say is it's palpable in your atmosphere. Now, hope and joy is one thing, but there's another chapter that you have in your book. And can I choose? Is it okay for me to choose a quote?
Go ahead.
Because I love what you've chosen on your chapter on intimacy. And intimacy with God. You've chosen a Thomas à Kempis quote, and it says this: "What wonder is it if I be set on fire by thy presence and be utterly consumed, when thou art a fire always burning and never failing." I mean, gosh, you can even feel it in the words are so powerful. Why did you choose that quote there?
My heart can just connect with it because I love the heart of God, and I love the burning heart of God. And when I look at him, or by which I mean just turn my heart inwards to him, to acknowledge him, it's not hard to just notice my love just pouring out. It's like being drawn to the fire of his love and the light of his love. And all of my life, he's really shown me that. And so one of my greatest delights is to just turn to him again and again and again, which is actually why I wrote the chapter on intimacy. And
brilliant, because even as I read the chapter and also the quote, there is nothing more intimate than being consumed by somebody, and this is the ultimate, being consumed by God himself and the fire of God. It's tremendous, it's strong, it's beautiful,
and it's life-giving. It's, you know, everything comes from that. And I say in that chapter that although I've talked about hope and joy beforehand, but I wouldn't be telling the whole story if I didn't say, really, it comes out of a life of intimacy with, you know, Jesus, who is everything. I mean, there is no greater beauty, there is no greater delight. You know, I noticed in my early 30s, in my lawyering years, sometimes I would just rush home from work to just have that time with God. And not that I became weird and antisocial. You know, we need friends, we need fun, we need community.
Yes.
But the joy and the delight of feeling his love and his kiss, and then just growing in that sort of joy. I mean, you know, and I can't say the word joy without bursting into a smile, because I know joy is ferocious. Did anybody ever tell you that, Louise?
Yes.
It is ferocious.
Yeah.
And hope is unstoppable. And a picture God gave me for hope is it's like a tank in an army. If you were to look at army kit, hope is unstoppable. Joy is ferocious. And people drenched in that will just change the world.
Wow. Unstoppable and ferocious.
Yep.
They are very strong words.
They are.
Well, Jen, tell me, in writing this book and creating the website and all of that, what is your hope for the listener, the reader?
Do you know, I feel like I have discovered treasure that a lot of other people don't know about. Now, I'm not saying that lots of people out there aren't hopeful and joyful, but I don't always see the amount of hope and joy I'd expect, even in people who know Jesus. And I feel like I've stumbled across, or not stumbled, but been shown by God, some treasure that I've got to tell other people, because everybody can have it. And you know what? In these days, it's not actually an option. In the days of turbulence that we're in, it's an imperative. If we are going to live thriving and dynamic lives, if we are going to really pulsate with the heart of heaven, then we have to know this. We have to be so anchored in hope and joy that we will be the signpost to Jesus in the world. And you look at the statistics in the world now for mental health and struggles. Do you know, the young people of today are tomorrow's leaders. It is not okay for us to stand by and do nothing. We have to rescue them. We have to open the gates to hope and joy. And you, in knowing Jesus, can do that. I can do that in knowing Jesus. And actually, I have a responsibility now to shout this out to people, that there is a mission, really, a call to release a momentum around the world to say we're not having despair, we're not having gloom, we have the light and we can point the world to the light.
I love what you're saying, Jen, because this is not false positivity. This is absolute truth. And it reminds me of Jesus' prayer when he said, this is how you should pray, you know, your kingdom come, your will be done. What is the atmosphere of heaven? But it is unstoppable hope and ferocious joy, as you say. And so this isn't just a nice thought or a way of coping. This is real, true life that you're talking about. I love it. And also you've answered my what was going to be my next question was, well, that's all very well for you, but what about for everybody else? And what you're saying is really this is for everybody. This is good news for everybody. Well, Jen, let me ask you this. What's the future for you? What's the future looking like?
Well, it's really exciting. I can say that with absolute confidence. I know I'm just beginning. I felt that for a while. And actually, when God was asking me to write the book, I kept stopping and starting. And he said, hurry up, Jennifer, because you must finish it before you're healed. So, and of course I have now, so I can just feel, because I know God's going to take away all the symptoms of MS.
Yes.
And so that's going to open up a whole new chapter in my life. What's next? I want to get this message out there.
Yes.
I want to communicate it really powerfully.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to write more books, not just about hope and joy, but other topics about hearing from God. I'm somebody who really sees and hears from God, and love to just train more in that area.
And this is really important, that you're speaking your message and talking about hope and joy before you've actually seen the full realization of healing in your body. And that testimony of, actually, I am healed. My body is just catching up with that reality, and the atmosphere that you're living in of hope and joy is making a way for that healing to come. So exciting future.
Absolutely. Really.
Can I just, there's one other little thing that I just can't not mention, which I loved at the end of your book, and that was, and I think it's your last chapter, but you have a quote by Steve Jobs who says, the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. How crazy are you?
Brilliant question, and I hope everybody who reads it
on a scale of 1 to 10, Jen, how crazy are you?
Well, I'm a dreamer with God, so I would like to say 12.
Great.
On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd like to say I'm a 12, because over and over again in the Bible, the one who was bold enough to believe God, and bold enough to step out, change the world. I mean, there's so many examples, and I just so relate to that passion piece of, you know, the greats like Daniel, Nehemiah, Gideon, just the ones who said, I'm not settling, God, and that is my heart. And so I'm just up for being a catalyst for change, because somebody has to be, and why shouldn't it be, or you, or anyone who's reading the book or listening to this? So watch this space.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, Jen, your life has changed because of your continual encounter with hope and joy. And I've no doubt that people reading your book or checking out your website, they are going to feel that and have access to the one who is full of hope and joy, and the joy and hope giver, just simply through reading your book and accessing your website. Which brings me to a very important point. Where can we get your book?
You can get it through my website, which is jenniferobrien.co.uk. It's also available directly at faithbuilderspublishing.co.uk and also through the Global Prophetic Alliance website.
Okay, excellent. And on all your social media, those links are there for those websites.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Can I recommend, this is a great read, go to Jen's website, jenniferobrien.co.uk, just say it again, and then you can get the links to her books. But also, Jen, for the future, there's going to be more. So fantastic to be talking to you today. I'll give you the last word.
We all need hope and joy at a deeper level, and it can be yours.